Now I am ashamed to be a Chiricahua. I will take the name Mexican enemies have given me. The whites will learn it, and you will learn it. From now on, I am Geronimo.
For decades, America saw only one image: a loyal, stoic rider trailing his masked hero across dusty plains, remembered for the phrase Kemo Sabe. But the man behind that silence was no mere sidekick. Jay Silverheels, born on the Six Nations of the Grand River, was a boxer, lacrosse champion, and proud Haudenosaunee man whose spirit defied Hollywood's shadow. The world saw Tonto, but now the truth of Jay Silverheels finally comes to light. Do we really know his story?
March 5th, 1980, we lost a wonderful man, Jay Silverheels. This special award is for Jay Silverheels.
The cradle of chiefs, Six Nations' roots and identity. Jay Silverheels was a man of profound intellectual dignity, a Mohawk actor, athlete, and activist who refused to be confined by the narrow roles Hollywood offered him. This is the story of the man beneath the myth, the lacrosse champion who ran like the wind, the Hollywood professional who challenged stereotypes from within, and the mentor who carved space for future generations of indigenous performers. Long before representation became a buzzword, Jay Silverheels was already fighting for it, quietly, defiantly, and with unshakable grace. And this is where his story truly begins. The man the world would one day know as Jay Silverheels was born Harold J. Smith on May 26, 1912. He grew up on the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve in Ontario, Canada, land given to the Haudenosaunee people in 1784 as part of their ancestral territory. This community was full of strong traditions, deep pride, and a clear sense of identity. For Jay, it was more than just a place to grow up. It shaped who he was: confident, dignified, and proud of his people. Jay came from a large and respected family. He was one of 11 children, and his roots ran deep in leadership. His grandfather, Chief A.G. Smith, was a respected Mohawk leader, a man known for his wisdom and strength. His father, Captain Alexander George Edwin Smith, was Cayuga, and his life was marked by both courage and service. When the First World War broke out, Captain Smith answered the call to serve. At that time, young Jay was only 4 years old. Captain Smith distinguished himself on the front lines of Europe's most brutal battles, including the Somme and Ypres, where he faced unimaginable conditions in the trenches of France and Belgium. His bravery earned him the Military Cross, one of the highest honors for gallantry in the British Commonwealth. After the war, his dedication continued at home. He served as an adjutant at Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, helping to train Polish-American recruits for the Blue Army, a volunteer force that would go on to fight for Poland's independence in France. For young Jay, these stories were more than family history. They were lessons in courage, loyalty, and leadership. In his household, strength was not measured only by physical power, but by moral conviction and service to others. Growing up under the influence of men like his grandfather and father, Harold developed a deep sense of duty and self-respect, grounded in the values of his Haudenosaunee heritage. This foundation of discipline and pride would guide him through every chapter of his life, from the playing fields of lacrosse to the sound stages of Hollywood. So when Jay eventually found his way to Hollywood, he didn't arrive as a blank slate or a simple Indian character, as Hollywood so often wanted to portray indigenous people. He came as someone with history, with purpose, and with an unshakable understanding of who he was and where he came from. Long before he became known as an actor, Jay was famous for something else entirely: his incredible athletic ability. In his youth, people knew him as Harry Smith, a gifted all-around athlete who played many sports but was especially skilled at lacrosse. For indigenous communities, lacrosse is more than a game. It's a sacred tradition, sometimes called the Creator's Game, and Harry played it with unmatched passion and power. In 1931, he was chosen as one of the first players for the professional indoor lacrosse team, the Toronto Tecumsehs. Over the next decade, Jay and his brothers, nicknamed Beef, Porky, and Chubby, played for teams all across Canada and the United States, including Buffalo, Rochester, and Akron. They weren't just athletes, they were innovators. During this time, Harry and other players helped create a new version of lacrosse called box lacrosse, a fast-paced indoor game played in hockey arenas during the off-season. This new style didn't just change the sport, it also created new business opportunities, helping arenas stay open year-round. This showed that Jay wasn't only a great athlete, he was a thinker and a strategist, someone who understood both the physical and the economic sides of the game. His quick mind and determination made him a leader on and off the field. He was also a skilled boxer. In 1938, he proved his talent in the ring when he won second place in the middleweight division at the Golden Gloves tournament in New York City's Madison Square Garden, one of the most respected boxing events in North America. His success as an athlete lasted long after his playing days were over. Decades later, in 1997, he was inducted into the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame, a lasting recognition of his impact on the sport. All of this came long before Hollywood ever called his name. Long before he became Tonto, Harold J. Smith had already forged a life built on strength, skill, and pride, a life that carried the heartbeat of the Haudenosaunee people. But when Hollywood came knocking, they weren't looking for the man he was. They wanted a symbol, a name that fit their story. And so, Harold J. Smith vanished, and Jay Silverheels was born. The golden nickname, the origin of Silverheels. The name Jay Silverheels, the name that would one day make him famous, and yet partly hide the real man behind it, was surprisingly born on the lacrosse field, not even in Hollywood. It came from his incredible speed and power as an athlete. According to teammates, the story of the name began during a lacrosse game in the early 1930s. Jay's team had just received new white shoes before a big match. When Harry took to the field, he moved so fast that one of the players watching said it looked like there were flashes of white at his heels. They joked that they couldn't call him White Heels, a name that would have sounded awkward and racially loaded, so they chose Silverheels instead. The nickname stuck immediately. It sounded sleek, fast, and full of energy. Everything Jay was on the field. When he later began working in Hollywood, he made a thoughtful decision. He kept the name. Jay Silverheels wasn't just a catchy stage name, it was a declaration of identity. It represented achievement, speed, and strength, not stereotype or subservience. In a time when most Indigenous actors were labeled and limited by the industry, choosing that name was a quiet but powerful act of control. By defining himself through ability rather than ethnicity, Jay Silverheels built a name that reflected his true worth. His journey from the fast-paced world of sports to the uncertain world of acting happened almost by chance. In 1937, while playing an exhibition lacrosse game in Los Angeles with a touring team, Jay caught the attention of popular actor Joe E. Brown, who was in the crowd. Brown was struck by Jay's athletic build and charisma and encouraged him to try his luck in Hollywood. It was a major turning point and a big risk. At the time, Jay was a respected professional athlete with a secure reputation. Moving to Hollywood meant starting over from the bottom, taking small, uncredited roles and working as a stuntman. But he brought with him all the skills that had made him a great athlete: discipline, endurance, and focus. Those same qualities helped him survive the unpredictable, competitive life of early Hollywood. In his early film work, he was sometimes credited as Harold Smith or Harry Smith, and he took whatever jobs he could find, doubling for other actors, riding horses, and performing dangerous stunts. His background in sports gave him the stamina and precision that film work required. Every fall, every fight scene, every galloping chase came naturally to him. Slowly, people began to notice the man with the quiet confidence and the unforgettable presence. Before long, Jay Silverheels was no longer just a name. It was a brand, a reputation, and a statement. It marked the arrival of someone who refused to be defined by Hollywood's narrow vision of native identity, and who had already proven himself, both on the field and in life, as a man of ability, courage, and pride. But fame has a way of rewriting a man's story. For Jay Silverheels, the very role that brought him recognition would also become his cage, a mask that hid as much as it revealed. Behind the mask of Tonto. Far before he took on the career-defining role of Tonto, Jay Silverheels was already making a name for himself in Hollywood's more prestigious circles. His early screen work included a role in the short film I Am an American, 1944, which reflected the era's patriotic sentiment during the Second World War. By the late 1940s, Silverheels was appearing in increasingly prominent Hollywood productions. He earned supporting roles in major films such as Captain from Castile, 1947, alongside Tyrone Power, Key Largo, 1948, with Humphrey Bogart, and Lust for Gold, 1949, opposite Glenn Ford. These opportunities allowed him to demonstrate his versatility and presence on screen, moving beyond mere background roles. These roles signaled that he was rising above simple stunt work and garnering attention from A-list directors. The year 1950 proved to be a turning point in Jay Silverheels' career, one that showed both his immense talent and the limitations imposed by Hollywood. That year, he took on a starring role in the western Broken Arrow, portraying the historical Apache leader Geronimo. This was no ordinary part. It demanded depth, sensitivity, and a careful balance between historical accuracy and dramatic storytelling. Silverheels brought to the role a sense of gravitas, rebellion, and leadership, capturing the conflicts and struggles of a man caught between his people and a changing world. It was a performance that showcased his range as an actor, proving he could embody historical complexity with dignity and emotional resonance. Yet, that same year, Jay Silverheels stepped into a very different kind of spotlight as Tonto, the stoic companion in the newly launched television series The Lone Ranger. While Broken Arrow had given him the space to portray a complex, fully realized native character, television stripped much of that depth away. Tonto became the loyal shadow to a white hero, a figure shaped more by stereotype than substance. It was a sharp contrast, and one that would define Silverheels' career. A gifted actor caught between authenticity and expectation. The paradox reveals the strategic tokenism of mid-century Hollywood. The industry was willing to employ indigenous actors like Silverheels to lend credibility and authenticity to films, particularly in supporting roles. But when it came to highly profitable, widely broadcast media, the economic imperative of appealing to a predominantly white audience often outweighed authenticity. The noble savage trope, simplistic, loyal, and one-dimensional, was easier to sell, and Silverheels, despite his skill and presence, was frequently confined within it. This year, then, marked not only Silverheels' rise to fame, but also the beginning of a lifelong negotiation. between the actor he was, the roles he deserved, and the industry-imposed image the world expected of him. It was a moment that revealed both his extraordinary talent and the structural barriers that would continually shape his professional identity. The premiere of the Lone Ranger television series in 1949 catapulted Jay Silverheels into a level of global visibility that few native actors had ever experienced. For 8 consecutive years, running until 1957, Silverheels became synonymous with Tonto, the loyal companion of the masked Lone Ranger. Their on-screen partnership developed into one of the most recognizable and enduring dynamics in Hollywood history, etching Silverheels' face, if not his full identity, into the fabric of popular culture. Tonto, as written in the scripts, was variably described as either Potawatomi or Comanche, yet his characterization remained largely bound by the conventions of the era. A steadfast, brave, and unwaveringly loyal sidekick, whose primary purpose was to support the Lone Ranger's quest for justice. Despite these limitations, Silverheels approached the role with a deep sense of pride and professionalism. He sought to infuse Tonto with dignity, integrity, and moral weight, working to ensure that even as a secondary character, Tonto would be seen as courageous and honorable, rather than merely a stereotypical background figure. Silverheels' portrayal was not limited to the small screen. He reprised the role in 2 feature films, The Lone Ranger, 1956, and The Lone Ranger and the Lost City of Gold, 1958, which further cemented his visibility and influence. While the role provided him with unparalleled fame and financial stability, it also revealed the systemic barriers faced by native actors in Hollywood, who were often confined to narrowly defined roles. Nevertheless, Silverheels leveraged the cultural and financial capital he gained through Tonto to advocate for native representation in the entertainment industry and challenge the very structures that had constrained him. In doing so, he transformed a role initially defined by limitation into a platform for both personal agency and broader cultural impact. On screen, Tonto was the fearless sidekick, riding into danger beside the Lone Ranger. Off-screen, Jay Silverheels faced a different kind of battle. The role demanded that he speak a caricatured language that reduced a proud Potawatomi man to a series of broken phrases. The very voice that captivated millions on screen was the source of deep personal frustration. Every line of pidgin English, every Kemo Sabe, repeated ad infinitum, was a reminder that his talent was constrained by the very scripts that celebrated him. The pidgin problem and the shackles of language. While Silverheels played Tonto with dedication and skill, he was deeply frustrated by how the character was written. The biggest source of this frustration was the dialogue. Tonto was almost always forced to speak in pidgin English. The simple, broken sentences he was given made the character seem uneducated or even mentally limited. This way of speaking was not just a professional challenge, it was a personal insult to Jay Silverheels, the man behind the character. Silverheels was known for his intelligence, eloquence, and strong character. He was an athlete, a careful negotiator of contracts, a strategic thinker, and came from a respected, educated family. To reduce such a capable and sophisticated man to someone whose only purpose was to follow orders and speak in broken English was deeply unfair and, for Jay Silverheels, profoundly painful. But the consequences of that stereotype reached far beyond him. Years later, Johnny Depp would voice a similar frustration, asking in Entertainment Weekly, "Why is the effing Lone Ranger telling Tonto what to do?" Dawn Moore, daughter of Clayton Moore, the Lone Ranger, recalled that Silverheels' wife, Mary, was well aware of her husband's quiet anger over how Native Americans were portrayed, often as loyal, simple-minded helpers to the white hero. Mary Silverheels was a woman of quiet grace. After Jay's death, the home they purchased in 1964, still perfectly cared for and immaculately kept, holds almost no visible trace of his long career. When asked how Jay truly felt about the role that defined him, she said, "Jay knew it was just a character. He changed what he could and didn't dwell on what he couldn't. No, he didn't like the dialogue, but he overcame that with his acting." This shows that the struggle over Tonto's character was not just a small professional disagreement. It was a personal, emotional conflict. It affected Silverheels and his family and showed the heavy emotional burden carried by early Native actors who were forced to play roles that ignored their full humanity. The duality of Jay Silverheels, man versus myth. Jay Silverheels came from Mohawk and Cayuga ancestry. His real-life lineage was specific, esteemed, and rooted in a rich cultural heritage. In contrast, his most famous role, Tonto, was a fictionalized noble savage of indeterminate tribal origin, sometimes described as Potawatomi, other times as Comanche, stripped of any concrete identity. This contrast between Silverheels' precise heritage and the generic, rootless typecasting of Tonto shows the ways Hollywood flattened Native identity for mainstream audiences. In his personal life, Silverheels was highly accomplished and assertive. He was a competitive athlete, even inducted into the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame, and he raised and raced standard-bred horses for recreation. He demonstrated agency, intelligence, and initiative, founding the Indian Actors Workshop, dedicating himself to activism and education, and negotiating his professional contracts with care and strategy. Yet on screen, Tonto existed largely as a passive, supportive sidekick, perpetually secondary to the Lone Ranger. Silverheels' dynamic, self-defining presence in real life was contrasted sharply with the constrained, subordinate figure he was asked to portray. Even Silverheels' intellect and voice were compromised in the role. While he was eloquent and capable of cultural leadership, Tonto was forced to speak rudimentary, non-native pidgin English. Similarly, his autonomy and private pursuits, entrepreneurial endeavors, personal passions, and professional accomplishments were flattened in the fiction, which defined him solely by his proximity to the masked hero. This tension between the accomplished man and his mythical on-screen counterpart reveals the hidden price Silverheels paid for fame. A life celebrated in silhouette, while the real man remained largely unseen. The real man was waiting to step forward, and in the next chapter, we finally unmask him. The man unmasked, the activist, and the entrepreneur. Jay Silverheels understood that his personal frustration with Tonto was not merely an individual grievance. It reflected a much larger, systemic problem within Hollywood. Native actors were routinely marginalized, their roles limited to simplistic, stereotypical depictions, while non-native actors frequently portrayed indigenous characters. Famous names such as Rock Hudson, Burt Lancaster, and Burt Reynolds often took on these parts, a practice that not only deprived Native performers of opportunities, but also reinforced shallow, distorted portrayals of indigenous cultures. For Silverheels, the issue went beyond his own career. It was a structural inequity that demanded a solution. Rather than allowing his frustration to fester or retiring comfortably on his earnings, Silverheels decided to transform his visibility and financial capital into action. He recognized that complaints alone would not change an industry built on entrenched biases. What was needed, he realized, was a systematic approach, a means to train indigenous actors professionally so they could compete for complex, nuanced roles when opportunities arose. This vision reflected Silverheels' long-term thinking and deep commitment to cultural advancement. He was not content with symbolic protest. He wanted to build a foundation that would serve generations to come. In the early 1960s, Silverheels co-founded the Indian Actors Workshop in Los Angeles, collaborating with notable figures such as singer-activist Buffy St. Marie and fellow actor Rod Redwing. The workshop represented a groundbreaking effort to create institutional support for Native performers, offering them the training and community networks largely denied by mainstream Hollywood. Silverheels articulated the workshop's mission in 1973, stating, "Our number. One goal is to tap into the dormant creativity of the Indians." This statement carried profound political and cultural significance, framing the problem not as a lack of talent within indigenous communities, but as an industry failure to cultivate and recognize that talent. The workshop operated with a distinctly grassroots approach. Classes and mentorship sessions were held in accessible, community-oriented spaces such as the Los Angeles Indian Center and the Echo Park United Methodist Church, rather than informal commercial Hollywood venues. Silverheels personally provided instruction and mentorship alongside colleagues like Noble Kid Chisel and William Bassett, emphasizing hands-on guidance, discipline, and professional skill development. By taking this direct educational approach, he addressed one of the key structural barriers facing Native actors, the lack of formal training and industry connections that were often prerequisites for serious dramatic work. Through the Indian Actors Workshop, Silverheels not only created practical opportunities for emerging talent, but also challenged the very system that had typecast him. He transformed his fame as Tonto into a tool for empowerment, ensuring that the next generation of Native actors would have the skills, confidence, and networks to claim roles on their own terms. His vision combined cultural advocacy with strategic action, demonstrating that education and mentorship could serve as the most effective weapons against stereotyping, marginalization, and the erasure of indigenous voices in American film and television. Beyond the mask, later roles of substance. After the Lone Ranger television series ended in 1957, Jay Silverheels continued to face typecasting as a Native American. In 1960, he appeared in the syndicated series Rescue 8, starring Jim Davis and Lang Jeffries, in an episode titled Leap of Life, where he played a Native American firefighter attempting to extinguish a forest fire. Silverheels continued to take guest roles on television throughout the 1960s. In 1964 and 1965, he appeared in 3 episodes of NBC's Daniel Boone, starring Fess Parker, demonstrating his versatility in supporting parts. In 1966, he guest-starred as John Tallgrass in the short-lived ABC comedy western series The Rounders, alongside Ron Hayes, Patrick Wayne, and Chill Wills. To supplement his acting work, Silverheels also worked as a salesman, showing his practical approach to life outside of Hollywood. During this period, he began publishing poetry inspired by his youth on the Six Nations Indian Reserve, and even recited his work on television, revealing another creative outlet beyond acting. Despite the limitations of typecasting, Silverheels often approached his fame with humor. In 1969, he appeared on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, in a comedy sketch where he played Tonto alone, poking fun at the character. This sketch was later included on the 1974 album Here's Johnny Magic Moments from The Tonight Show, in which he jokingly said, "My name is Tonto. I hail from Toronto and I speak Esperanto." In 1970, he appeared in a Chevrolet commercial as a Native American chief who rescues 2 hunters, with the William Tell Overture playing in the background. He also spoofed his Tonto character alongside Clayton Moore in a Stan Freberg commercial for Geno's Pizza Rolls, and appeared in the film The Finks with John Hart, another actor who had played the Lone Ranger. As his career progressed, Silverheels deliberately sought roles that allowed him to step outside the Tonto persona. He accepted challenging parts that gave him more depth and authority. In 1969, he appeared in True Grit as a condemned criminal, a brief but high-profile role. In 1973, he landed a major supporting role as John Crow in the western Santee, starring Glenn Ford. Although critics found the film itself unremarkable, Silverheels' character was more complex and allowed him significant screen time, providing a stark contrast to the sidekick figure he had been known for. That same year, he played a wise, white-haired chief in The Man Who Loved Cat Dancing, further emphasizing roles of authority. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, his television guest appearances, including shows like Daniel Boone and The Brady Bunch, and his choice of film roles demonstrated his commitment to being recognized as a serious, versatile actor. Even as he remained linked in the public imagination to Tonto, Silverheels continually worked to expand his craft, taking on characters that offered depth, leadership, and complexity beyond the simplified fame of his early career. The Actor and the Horses, A Private World of Merit. Away from the scrutiny and bias of Hollywood, Jay Silverheels discovered a space where fairness and skill, not stereotypes, determined success: the world of harness racing. In his personal life, he was an avid and accomplished horseman who bred, trained, and raced standard-bred horses. His dedication went far beyond casual interest. In 1974, he obtained an official license for harness racing, demonstrating his professionalism and commitment to the sport. This pursuit of excellence in horse racing is deeply revealing. In this arena, victory depended on measurable performance: the horse's speed, the trainer's discipline, and the owner's insight, rather than on the prejudices of casting directors or the narrow imaginations of Hollywood producers. For Silverheels, whose on-screen career had been constrained by typecasting, the racetrack offered something liberating: a world of pure meritocracy. It was a realm where his intelligence, discipline, and strategy could flourish without distortion. Through this pursuit, Silverheels found not only personal satisfaction, but also a symbolic form of justice, a world where results, not race, defined worth. His dedication to harness racing reflected the entrepreneurial and strategic sides of his personality, the same qualities that guided his activism and artistic vision. Beyond his public persona, Silverheels built a full life defined by work, family, and purpose. He was married twice and the father of 6 children. Among them was J. Anthony Silverheels, Jr., who would go on to follow in his father's footsteps and become an actor himself, ensuring the continuation of the family's artistic legacy. Yet, Silverheels' influence extended far beyond the racetrack or the film set. He was not an isolated figure, but part of a growing movement of indigenous artists and thinkers who used their public visibility to challenge and reshape cultural narratives. Alongside contemporaries such as Chief Dan George and Will Sampson, Silverheels helped lay the groundwork for a more honest and respectful representation of Native peoples in media. While George and Sampson used their performances to challenge stereotypes directly, Silverheels' contribution was more structural. Through the founding of the Indian Actors Workshop, he sought to change the system from within, creating educational pipelines, fostering community, and ensuring that future generations of Native actors would have the training and opportunities he had been denied. The culmination of Jay Silverheels' decades-long struggle for dignity and recognition came near the end of his life. In 1979, he reached a historic milestone, becoming the first Native actor to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. This moment carried profound emotional weight, As reported by the New York Times, Silverheels wept during the ceremony. Those tears reflected far more than personal pride. They symbolized reconciliation and vindication. It was a public acknowledgement that his life's work had reshaped the cultural landscape. Jay Silverheels died in 1980 at the age of 67, but the seeds of opportunity he planted have yielded a flourishing cultural harvest. While the specific Indian Actors Workshop in Echo Park eventually ceased operations, its central philosophy to cultivate, train, and demand space for Indigenous voices is actively thriving today. By demanding that Native people play Native roles, and by providing the institutional training necessary to excel in those roles, Silverheels fundamentally altered the career path for Indigenous performers. The world that had once defined him through limitation now recognizes Jay Silverheels for his courage, his vision, and his lasting contribution to the dignity of Indigenous voices in Hollywood and beyond. But could his legacy ever truly step out from Tonto's shadow? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.